Thank you. Thank you for coming to my talk. I'm Patricia Robin Woodruff, and I use she, her pronouns. My maternal line comes from the Lemko culture in the Carpathian Mountains, which is what started me on this journey of discovery. I've been intensively studying these beliefs for over 10 years now, and over that period of time, I earned my Master's of Divinity and PhD as a philosopher of metaphysical sciences. But these initials are just an easy way to sum up my extensive academic reading and research. This study also resulted in my becoming a spiritually initiated as a basurka, which is a sort of shamanic witch. Academia has long overlooked the Slavic lands, not because not much was written. However, the clues to ancient belief are hidden all over. We can see this in the lore of plants, superstitions, fairy tales, and in this case, colors. So let us start with one of the traditional tales of Baba Yaga titled Vasilisa the Wise. Once upon a time, there was a young girl named Vasilisa. As her mother was dying, she gave her young daughter the gift of a doll. This doll was infused with the magic of a mother's love, and the girl kept it close, especially when her father remarried, and Vasilisa had to deal with a cruel stepmother and two stepsisters. Her father also regretted his choice of a partner and spent less and less time around the house, leaving Vasilisa to the torment of her stepmother and two jealous stepsisters. One day, the stepmother deliberately let the fire in the house go out. She turned to Vasilisa and said, "You need to go into the woods to Baba Yaga's house and bring back a coal to restart our fire." And even though Vasilisa didn't know the way, she knew it was useless to argue with her grandmother or a stepmother. So off she went into the woods with her doll in her apron pocket. She came to a fork in the road, and starting to despair, she said aloud, "Should I go right or left?" When she said left, she felt the doll in her pocket jiggle, and a tiny shrill voice said, "Go left." So lacking any other guide, she turned to her left and took that path. As she walked along, Vasilisa heard a horseman behind her. As he rode past her, she saw he was wearing all white and riding a white horse, and he swiftly disappeared down the path. Later, she heard hoofbeats behind her again, and this time a horseman dressed all in red, riding a red horse, breezed past her on the path and soon was out of sight. And as night was approaching, a horseman all in black on a black horse rode up and passed her and proceeded down the path. So following the track of the horse's hooves in the fading light, she came upon a strange chicken-legged hut deep in the woods. The hut was surrounded by a bone fence, and every fence post was topped by a skull with fiery glowing eyes. In the yard, she saw a withered old woman with 3 horses in the stable nearby. This she knew was Baba Yaga. Vasilisa was scared, but there was nothing to be done. She gathered her courage and introduced herself, asking for a coal to light her home's fire. Barely glancing at Vasilisa, Baba Yaga said, "Not so fast. First, you have to prove yourself worthy. Feed my horses, my bright dawn, my red sun, and my dark midnight, and then come inside, and I will give you some other tasks. And if you complete them to my satisfaction, then I will give you the fire that you need." Now, let us pause the story here. You need to understand that fairy tales are actually pagan teaching tales. In Slavic lands in the year 988 Common Era, Vladimir the Great, ruler of the Kievan Rus, converted to Christianity. And he set about destroying the sacred sites and statues of the deities that were what remained of the indigenous beliefs of the tribes of the Euro-Slavic lands. Now, while it was easy for him and his court and knights who lived in the city to embrace a different religion, however, the people whose lives depended on the land knew they needed to stay in the good graces of their pagan deities. It was this right relationship with the land and nature that kept the crops emerging each spring as the days brightened and brought the harvest at the end of the summer. It was what got them through the dark winter time, keeping away the wolves and protecting them from dying in the cold. So even though the Pagani, the people of the countryside, were persuaded to convert by the very compelling argument of you can convert to Christianity or we'll lock you in a dungeon or kill you, they still secretly kept doing what they had always done, plus now going to church on Sundays. This meant that the pagan clergy were now out of a job as they were replaced by Greek and Latin-trained Christian priests. So being skilled in the performative arts that are part of conducting ritual, the pagan clergy turned to being traveling entertainers called skomoroki, playing songs and telling stories about old gods transformed into heroes, doing puppet shows, taking their healing bears on the road as dancing bears, and stopping back into towns conveniently each solstice, equinox, and cross-quarter days to lead the holiday parties. They also stopped back at the towns to help at weddings, where the Christian priest conducted a mass and wedding in church, and the pagan skomoroki acted as master of ceremonies at the feast and blessed the couple as well. In this way, the old teachings continued in songs and tales and became part of our ingrained teachings of children, which continues today. I mean, think it over. How many of us have been inspired by the magic of fairy tales as a child? And often we can see that these tales of magic led to our becoming pagan. But there are lots more religious teachings hidden in these tales that will stand out once you understand what you're looking at. So here we have Baba Yaga as the teaching crone and death goddess, connected to these three colors, white, red, and black. Baba Yaga even tells us in the story the colors of these swift horses represent the dawn, the day, and sunset going into the dark night. And it's a cycle because after night, the sun rises again at dawn. The traveling minstrels left it as an exercise for the student to connect these colors to the cycle of the seasons as well. Since during this period, the Slavs and the Germans celebrated 3 seasons, not so much the 4 that we're used to. There was spring, the summer into harvest season, and winter, which circled back around to spring again. This cycle imagery gets lost once people start to succumb to the Christian teachings, which espouses a linear viewpoint. You don't exist until you pop into existence, live on this earth for an infinitesimal amount of time, and then based on how you behave, you go to heaven for eternity or hell for forever. But in the pagan viewpoint, your life follows the path of the sun. You are born, live here, and descend into a watery underworld where after resting, your spirit travels again to be born. This idea also extends to our divine parents, but we only have half an hour, so we're mainly going to focus on the Earth Mother. She is born either on the winter solstice or the spring equinox. Both variations exist. In any case, she swiftly grows into a young maiden who is in love with the young spring lord, who is baby Cupid in early February, but by May Day they are lovers. They are fertile and sexual, and that energy is transmitted to nature. This life energy brings the spring lambs, the baby bunnies, and lots of eggs that got adopted into the Christian holiday of Easter. We also see that life energy extends to the fields and fruits that ripen over the summer, becoming the symbols of the fertile Earth Mother, and finally withering away in late autumn and resting with the plants and animals through winter before arising again. So white represents this glowing life energy, the dawn, while red is the symbol of living blood and ripening fruits, noontime in our life, and black is the withering energy of the underworld. So remember the fairy tale princess, Snow White, with skin as white as milk, lips as red as blood, and hair as black as ebony. She fell into enchanted sleep, which was caused by the dark witch. This represents the crone goddess, putting spring to sleep and taking over during winter until the springtime goddess is awakened by her young prince and they are joyfully married at May Day, becoming fertile in the summertime. All three of these seasons can be embodied in the goddess, or she can be perceived separately. Like snapshots in the books of one's life, budding youth, a productive and creative adult, and the wise one who teaches as she lets go of the mortal world and merges with the spiritual. However, Baba Yaga is not usually understood as a triple goddess. So let's come back to her tale when we've looked at some other cultures. But here's another important point. What we think of as names of goddesses are simply titles. Now, that's not to say that spirit can't manifest as discrete deities who change their form to reflect the land and the people that believe in them, but it will give you a different perspective to look at the goddess as a manifestation of spirit being called by different titles. Just like I looked very different when I was a maiden called Patty, a mother called Mom, and now in the role of a gray-haired teacher Robin as I strive to become a wise one. So when we look at India, we see the Tridevi made up of Sarasvati, Lakshmi, and Parvati. But Hinduism became much more male-centric in the intervening years between the Paleolithic matrifocal beliefs and the wealth-accumulating patriarchal society we find ourselves in. The current male-dominated viewpoint tends to focus much more on the trinity of male gods known as the Trimurti. That's Brahma, the creator, Vishnu, the preserver, and Shiva, the destroyer. While the Tridevi are simply seen as consorts of the male gods. However, it's only females who can give birth. She is the creator. In this older layer of the Tridevi, the goddesses carry the titles of Maha Sarasvati as the creatrix, Mahalakshmi as the preserver, and Mahakali as the destroyer. All of them being the mother, Maha, but understood in her different roles. So now that you know Baba Yaga's clue about colors, you can see it in the Tridevi. The young spring goddess, Sarasvati, is often dressed in white. She also rides a white swan, which connects her to the upper world. We see Lakshmi dressed in red, but instead of the prosperity of the harvest in the mortal realm, she brings the wealth that a hierarchical system is based on. Her creative force is channeled into being the dutiful wife. And then we have Kali, whose name comes from Kala, which can mean the black one. She is most known for being the goddess of death, but she was the supreme being who controls life, death, and rebirth. And Kala also means time. Kala controls the passage of time, just like Baba Yaga with her three horsemen of dawn, day, and midnight. So in the Tridevi, the focus is on creation, preservation, and destruction. Sarasvati, Lakshmi, and Kali. But when we look at the goddess through the lens of three seasons, the young goddess of love, Radha, can be seen as another title for Sarasvati. Radha is the beautiful maiden partnered with her lover Krishna, the stealer of butter and wooer of women. Now, we can easily see this similarity of belief that these concepts of deity existed before the Indo-Aryan split that occurred around 2000 BCE. The basis of Vedic teachings is said to have descended in an unbroken line since 8000 BCE. And these beliefs are also foundational to the Slavic cultures in Central Europe around and above the Black Sea. Now, this is actually a map of the telegraph lines from India, but it lets you see the path between India in the lower corner, going past the Black Sea and the Slavic lands on one side, and Greece on the other, and on up into England and Scandinavia with the Anglo-Saxons and the Norse. So this should help you picture the general area that these beliefs spanned. So where else can we see similarities of belief? One of the best documented cultures, because of the development of writing, is that of ancient Greece. Wikipedia describes them as a nation native to Greece, Cyprus, southern Albania, Anatolia, parts of Italy and Egypt, and to a lesser extent, other countries surrounding the Eastern Mediterranean and Black Sea. And in this culture, we see Hecate, the triple goddess. And, oh, look, legends tell us her sacred colors are white, red, and black. Now, while she's viewed as a triple goddess, she's not usually looked upon as maiden, mother, and crone, but rather in the roles of the Tridevi as a connection between the upper world, the middle world, and the underworld. Hecate is often depicted as a three-faced pillar who stands at the crossroads. But this crossroads is not the intersection of two roads forming an X, but rather a three-way intersection in the shape of a Y. According to Theoi.com, Hecate has the power over heaven, earth, and sea. She's actually a titaness and outside the power structure of Zeus and his pantheon, because she is part of a much older strata of belief. However, Hecate is sometimes grouped into a lunar trinity with Artemis and Selene, Artemis as the young crescent moon, Selene as the full moon, and Hecate as the waning moon. However, I think Hecate's maiden, mother, and crone aspect is hidden in the abduction story of Persephone, where Hecate is the only witness to Persephone's disappearance. Just like in Snow White, the young goddess of spring disappears from the mortal realm. In this case, spring's disappearance is caused by the underworld god Hades, rather than the goddess in the form of a witch. But we still see the maiden, mother, and crone. Persephone is also known as Kori or Kora, which just means young woman. The goddess's mother aspect is Demeter, who is connected to the wheat and bountiful harvest, while Hecate is connected to black animals, the night, and witches. Now, it's just that Greece doesn't have the same kind of seasons as Central Europe. Cretan roads have winter daytime temperatures in the 60s and 70s. That's Fahrenheit, 15 to 21 degrees Celsius for our European friends. So this would explain the minimization of her seasonal maiden, mother, and crone role. So traveling up to the top of the European continent, we have the Norse. With the Norse, we also see the three goddesses of fate, the Norns, Skuld, Verdani, and Urd, spinning the threads of fate and representing maiden, mother, and crone. Skuld is the youngest Norn and is said to represent the future. Her name means obligation and shares the same linguistic root as the word should. Verdani is in the present. Urd is said to represent the past, and her name literally means fate, or what is known in Old English as weird. They are said to make the universe and weave the thread of existence, which means they are controlling time. However, in the poetry of the Volospa, they have been jointly described as maidens mighty in wisdom, but they're usually all depicted as crones. Although I haven't found any colors associated with them, the Norns are always compared with the Greek fates, the Moirai, who were depicted in Finnish medieval tapestry in the colors of white, red, and a dark blue black. And there are also the three goddesses, Freya, Frigg, and Hel. Of all these cultures, the Norse is probably the most influenced by modern layers of thought, as well as Christianity, and consequently has the most in the way of muddled overlapping symbols. Freya clearly has a winged cloak, and like Sarasvati's swan, this represents the upper world. She is the goddess of beauty and is known for her sexuality. However, her colors, along with white, are also listed as gold and red. She mixes the maiden role of lover into that of the mother. She is represented by the pomegranate of the maiden, but also the apple of the harvest mother. We have Mother Frigg, who is known for marriage and fertility. And yet her husband Odin carries many of the symbols of the underworld, his black ravens and wolves, his knowledge of the magic of the underworld, and he oversees a portion of the dead in Valhalla. Of course, Hel is clearly a goddess of the underworld, her title deriving from her realm of death. She is associated with the color black, but there is no rebirth component to lighten her lore, probably because of the influence of Christianity upon the Norse sagas. So back in the Slavic lands, we have the young spring goddess Vesna, whose name literally means spring. She can also be called Radha, just like we saw in Indian lore, or Lada. Radha in Bulgarian means joy, while Lada in Old Czech means maiden, and in Serbia and Croatian refers to a bride. While in fairy tales, this young goddess is called Vasilisa, meaning queen or ruler. The mother goddess is Peronika, and in Slavic lands, the three-petaled iris is also called Peronika. She is petitioned to control the summer storms and rain, leading to a good harvest. She can also be called Gromnica, Grom being an onomatopoeic Slavic word for thunder. Gromnica morphed into Christianity under the influence of Christianity. She protected people from the fires caused by lightning hitting the thatched roof. Names are used. In the Slavic languages, mora means nightmare, while in Latin and Greek, the word mora is used for blackberries or dark mulberries. But in fairy tales, she's the grandmother, Baba Yaga, who lives in a strange chicken-legged hut deep in the woods. Now, to finish our tale. Baba Yaga sets 3 tasks for young Vasilisa. The first 2 involved cleaning everything in the yard and house and cooking enough to satisfy Baba Yaga's voracious appetite, which Vasilisa accomplished with wit and hard work. But she almost despaired over the 3rd task, which was to separate a huge pile of poppy seeds mixed with dirt. She started the job, but she realized that the task was so overwhelming that she started to cry. She heard the tiny voice of her doll saying, "Don't despair. Go to sleep and it will be done by morning." And sure enough, the little doll, with the help of some ants, magically accomplished the task for her. Baba Yaga rewarded the girl with one of the glowing skulls, with its fire inside, and sent Vasilisa off home. When Vasilisa returned home, the magical fire shot out of the skull in all directions, reigniting her hearth fire and also burning her wicked stepmother and stepsisters into ashes. Her father later returned home and was overjoyed to see his lost child. Eventually, Vasilisa went on to marry the Tsar, and they lived happily ever after. Now, you may recognize in the symbols of this fairy tale the light of the skull as the light of wisdom, which was obtained both by being a hard worker and separating the good seeds of knowledge from the grime that had accumulated around the seeds. And now, hopefully, that has lit the fire of your own minds to be able to recognize these symbols of Baba Yaga's palette through the various cultures of the Euro-Slavic lands and beyond.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Patricia. That was wonderful. And she's got some upcoming events. She's going to be at Sacred Space Conference and doing a fascinating topic, the magic of the bear in Euro-Slavic indigenous belief. Thank you so much. We'll definitely have to have you back when we're doing animal magic as our theme. All right.
Thank you.